Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Free Abundance. So in today's live video, I'm going to be doing a follow-up from one of my previous videos with the appearances topic from my Remember Who You Are study guide volume 1. And I wanted to kind of piggyback off of some of the things that I was mentioning in that video in regards to our appearances, identity as an African American in the diaspora, all of the different categories of who we are under every said terminology. I feel like it's important for people to understand we have to approach our identity with the names that we're given and the names that we are reclaiming for our own reclamation purposes. So these words are being used. However, I have my own way of identifying myself within the diaspora outside of these colonial said texts. So the section in this study guide here I'm going to be reading through is going to be on page 54. As you can see here, it's going to be this exercise here. And I'm going to read through all of it. It talks about genealogy. As you can see in the title, genealogy, identity, appearances, as someone in the diaspora, all have a collective understanding and kind of explanation point when it comes to who you see yourself as, what you identify with, and how you use those terms and those labels essentially to make sense of what your own journey is. So I'm going to read the exercise here. So it states, genealogy is the use of records such as oral interviews, family Bibles, census records, military records, newspaper articles, photographs, and other historical information to study families, family history, and the tracing of their lineages. Genealogists use the information about a family to demonstrate kinship and pedigrees of its members. As people of the African diaspora, we rarely have access to historical records prior to plantation life. In the oral tradition of our ancestors, consider making family conservations a tradition and a step towards rounding out the ancestry information received from your African ancestry test results. So it's going to give you some questions here that you can ask yourself in context with what your direct bloodline is and how to understand the information that you may have been given. I feel like for a lot of people within the diaspora who have a hard time tracing your lineages because the information that you're being given from whether it be your grandparents or, people within your family are not as accurate as you would hope for them to be. So I think it definitely makes genealogy and science more, fact-based. Especially when it comes to platforms that were created by our people. It's for us. It was built by us. And that's why I feel such a stronger connection with the African Ancestry platform outside of any other DNA, organizations that, give us information. I've only done one other DNA test. I'm not a big, DNA person in the first place. However, I did, give African ancestry a try after doing the regular ancestry. And, I'm always sharing this, ethnicity estimate, all of these things, kind of trying to make sense of all of it. But they are the only other platform outside of African ancestry that I have, tried and was curious about. However, I'm not really into, getting into all these platforms because if it's not built by us, if it doesn't acquire or encompass the specimens that come from our people specifically, if they don't already have, these samples from our people, how can they tell us what people we come from? So that's why I feel like African ancestry is one of the most reputable places to receive that information that we are otherwise not able to find within other organizations via, genealogy. So it says here are some popular questions to ask of your family members, perhaps starting with the oldest ones to create a picture of your family's history. We recommend using a journal, voice recorder, or video to capture the information. So I think it's nice just to see here, kind of some questions that you can ask, if you have close relatives, if you have an elder who can give you factual information via pictures, if you're able to get pictures of your family members, you can clearly see that, your lineage came from a certain, group. Otherwise, if you didn't have, personally for myself, I've been able to trace back family pictures and see that majority of the people in my maternal lineage are melanated people. So I know that there were no intermarriages within the last 4 decades of my family's maternal bloodline. So I know that they weren't intermarrying and they weren't mixing. They were all married to melanated people. So I think it's good to have that information so that you can see, well, they didn't intermarry. They didn't have mixed children. They all stayed within their groups of ethnic backgrounds. So these are the questions here that you can ask yourself. I just think it's nice to understand for yourself how you can acquire fact-based information. So it'll ask you here, to ask yourself, what is your full name? Are you named after anyone? Do you have any nicknames? In a lot of African cultures and tribal persons within the continent and inside and outside of the diaspora have a lot of significances with names. There's a lot of names that carry on through lineages, and those are the oral traditions that were passed down that kept people connected to a family link. So if you didn't have a birth certificate because otherwise they did not trace their births during a certain point in history, then you knew that you were connected to a certain family based on the name that you were given. I've done a lot of, speaking with Africans in my local community and understanding the name traditions, how your name was passed back, how you were, put up on, a scale and rank based on your family's paternal name for sons. So it'll ask, what is your birth date? Where were you born? Where did you live growing up? What memories do you have of your neighborhood? If you were someone who was very closely knit and had a close family that only stayed in one place, then it's easy for you to trace what your family's history was because you never moved to any other place. But if you are someone who is very spread out, where people moved and people, were disconnected and were all over the country, then it's definitely more difficult to figure out where you can pinpoint your lineage to, because there aren't a lot of people to, get that information from. It'll ask you, to ask yourself, what is your educational background? What jobs have you had? What are your hobbies? Just basic questions to ask yourself and to kind of help you align with, who am I? Who am I based on the area that I've lived in? Who were my cousins? Who were my aunts and uncles? And then you go on, back before that. Who were my great grandparents? Who were my great uncles? Who were my great aunts? And so on and so forth. That way you can get, fact-based information based on, well, I know what my family looks like. I know that they are Black, African, melanated people, and no one mixed with outside of their race. So it's good to understand that when you're thinking about genealogy and looking at these, this information and trying to figure out, what does this mean, having estimates and understanding that, well, we're not, just one linear line of ethnicity, based on, especially if you're going back 500 to 2000 years, there's no way that everyone that is within your bloodline stuck with one thing, because they were also scattered by the slave trade. our history doesn't start with slavery, but you have to understand that slavery is a big part of why there is so much movement and why we are so intermixed, because we were here, we were there. Over a course of 2,000 to 5,000 years, we've been everywhere, and we are mixed with all of these different groups. We are mixed within ethno-linguistics. So there's a lot that we have to try to break down in order to understand who we are and how we can live our lives paying homage to all of these people that encompass our entire being. So I'm going to go ahead and read this next page here. And this is just kind of talking about the organization of African ancestry. So this is the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, the AAHGS. And it just states here, it is an important resource in our community. AAHGS preserves African American genealogy, cultural diversity, and genealogical information nationwide. So they do give you, their website here. If you go to aahgs.org, you can really do some background information into how spot on and how high key these results are for our people, because it was built by us. It wasn't built by anyone that, otherwise doesn't understand our people. It was built for us. It was built by us. It was, something that was created to give back to us factual information. So I feel that this is the most solid proof of evidence that you can find when it comes to genealogy and DNA testing. So there's one question here that I wrote down some answers to that were, I felt were really deep for me. And I'm going to share that here. So I'm going to share what the question is. And then I'm also just going to read this quote here. They have a lot of quotes at the top of these pages here. And I'm a big quote person. I love Proverbs, short, meaningful text. So I'm going to read this one here. And it states here, "And now is that moment that you tell them the truth. Stand tall like the trees in the forest where you have found your roots." So this section is called truth. I feel like, as I stated before, appearances and truth go together. If you know what you appear to be, then you know the truth of who you are and who you ought to be. So the question here is, what role does knowing your roots play in your identity today? How might that change if you took an African ancestry test? So my answer here, I put, knowing my roots plays a huge role in my identity because it eliminates the guesswork of acquiring said facts from anti-Afro sources. Having a platform to stand on versus an installment of opinions supersedes the already biased information fields. Trusting the word and study of your own like-minded people and ancestral scholars brings forth nuance to truth. So I feel like, once I took this endeavor, I made sure that I looked into, well, who was this created by? Am I going to get an unbiased result here? Because, a lot of people are afraid to take DNA tests because they believe that, there's a bias that exists within genealogy that's not going to give you accurate results. So I feel like having chosen this organization to work with and to trust with that information was the best thing to do, because it was, created for us. It was created by our people. It was created to give back to our communities, to bring us together as one, to understand our various lines of lineages that stem from all over the world, all over the continent, and so on and so forth. So there's nothing that you can say, is a fallacy or is fake when it comes to what was created by us. You have to trust in your people enough to know that this was created for us with no biases. So I think that, going forward, into my journey and understanding myself and how I want to, present myself with my heritage being worn proudly as a Mende woman who is, acquiring this information to understand who my mothers were. What did they persevere through? What, type of personalities did they have? Because as a woman, the matriarch who is, said to be the leader of a lineage, I feel like it's really important, being a mother of a daughter, to pass down this matriarchal subset of information for her to move forward into her life with and to give to her daughters. Because, as I stated before, mother daughter bonds are very important when it comes to understanding your maternal lineage and heritage. That way, you are firm in your belief, you know who you are, and no one can tell you what you're not and what, they think you are. You already know, and there's no refuting those facts. So I feel like when it ties into appearances, dressing, in traditional wear of, your people is definitely a way to connect with the experience. Wearing, you know, um, handmade cloths, hand woven materials that were made by your people, it brings a sense of belonging for you, and it gives you an extra boost of confidence that raises you to a higher standard. And you'll kind of, walk into life with more pride, knowing that you have your people behind you, whether you know them directly in your bloodline or not, they are still a direct derivative of your lineage. So I feel like if that's the most that we can get as people within the diaspora, then you have to take it. I feel like we start to ask more. We ask for more, we want more, but we don't know what more it is that we want. So that's why I kind of added to my title here, is identity enough? Because there are some people who just, are digging to try to find, you know, um, basically something, that is obviously already was missing, within your families, that they didn't give to you. And it's like you start feeling like you need something more. And I think that for us, that is where we get more. We start living those experiences, we start learning our languages. That is very much why I have, my Mende, linguistic tools and things like that. And I make, cuisines. I connect with the culture through food, through language, through fashion, and really putting myself into the lived experience, because that's all that we can get. If that's all that we can get, then that's all that you can really accept. So I feel like there's a lot that our people have to be proud of. There's a huge plethora of information out there, and we have to understand how to digest all of this information and make sure that if we're going to be the leaders of the next revolution for the next generations, then we have to make sure that what we're speaking is going to be in a loving, kind, informative manner, so that people are not, disgraced by, someone feeling like their lineage of people is more superior, and from a colonial standpoint, or an anti, black, so to speak, anti-melanated um position. So I feel like it's just very important for us to unite and educate one another, whether you're from the continent and you are connected, with the American diaspora. I feel like those bonds between us and our communities are so important, because we can learn from them. They are the only ones who can teach us who we are, because they still live with those traditions and those languages, and they still live every day with those, pieces that were given to them. And us, otherwise, who did not have it, we can learn from that. So I feel like, identity is important, and you have to take what you can get. When you're looking into a lot of the oral traditions, when it comes to within different tribes, how there were no birth records. So it's hard for you to actually trace down. I can't trace down this name because you don't understand the language that the name was written in, or what the name represented and how it represented more than just, a neighborhood where your family was born. Um, it's just more complex than that when it comes to different tribes of people, and understanding from a, continental standpoint is such a large lay of land, and there's so many people, and digesting that fact there will help you to understand. I have to take what I can from here because it is a mystery and it is so hard to trace in the first place. So I love, African Ancestry, the platform, what they are doing for all of us, bringing us together, under one umbrella of understanding, from love, from acceptance, and from an educating standpoint. So I'm definitely, as I've stated on many occasions in my videos, a Pan-Africanist. Whether I'm using the word African to draw context, I don't identify myself under this word anyway, but for contextual purposes, using these words will make you understand I am in this for a united, reason. I'm here to help unite people within the diaspora through educating. So I feel like this platform is something that anyone can benefit from as an African American in the diaspora, wherever you identify yourself. This is definitely something that was created for us, and we can definitely make the most out of it for our children. So that's going to be it for this video today. I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of some of the, topics that I mentioned in the appearances video, kind of talking about how you dress, and stereotypes, and how, differently people are seen when you dress in your traditional wear, and how it really changes your status in society. If not in society, for yourself, it'll change how you feel about yourself. So I feel like appearances and identity are very important when you are finding out who you truly are. So if you enjoyed this live video, please give it 2 thumbs up. I appreciate any feedback, any questions. As I stated before, this is a safe space. This isn't anywhere for anti-Black, anti-African rhetoric. Anything that is divisive is not going to be tolerated here. I'm here to share my journey. I'm not here to use any negative banter to hurt others, to disconnect our people. I'm here to share what I know, and hopefully it'll be used in a positive manner for the next generations. So I appreciate my subscribers, and as I stated before, I would love for you to interact more, leaving comments, rate each video for this new year, and I will definitely have a lot more immersive content in this 2026 new year. So thank you so much for watching.